Now, the link, honestly, there's a little bit of, it kind of fails the laugh test to say that there's a link from coverage of environmental problems to people's stress levels being so elevated that it shuts down their immune system. Well, first of all, trying to sell a disadvantage with a couple of internal links, that's part of the fun. Can you find evidence that is of high enough quality to do it? But my first reaction was to think you could make the link between this and coverage of, between stress and immune system response to swine flu and coverage of environmental questions and pollution and so forth. You can make that linkage. But do you know what else you can do? You can go out and cut a few link cards to other things that affirmatives are likely to claim along the way in answering other disadvantages. Let's say you have an argument out there about the economy, and they answer the other argument by saying the plan would actually help the economy. The plan would lead to job creation. Well, you know what? You improve the job market, it's very, very easy to find evidence that being jobless is a source of stress. You can even find, and I guarantee you these cards exist, cards that say being unemployed depresses your immune system, that it causes so much physical stress that people who are unemployed are more likely to come down with major diseases because their immune system goes down. Now, that's one of the places where you've got to be real on top of your explanation. Because a lot of parent judges who may not follow what you're saying, they may think, well, it's a bad thing for your immune system to go down because then swine flu will kill you. So you got to keep explaining to them what a cytokine storm is and why a good immune system is actually a handicap and you can wind up dead. It's also the case that people in answering politics disadvantages, they may say that this is a plan that would be popular, that this is a plan that everybody would claim credit for, and it would put a stop to bipartisan bickering. Well, you know what? Media coverage of partisan squabbling and media coverage of dysfunctional government is also correlated with people feeling a sense of hopelessness and people feeling physical or emotional stress. What you can do is you can almost go down and catalog all the sort of utility arguments that people tend to have about their affirmatives. We'll save money. That'll bring down the deficit. The deficit causes people to feel that the government is going bankrupt. That's a source of stress. You can go through all of them, and with a little spot research, and in some cases, if you don't have a card, you can still explain the argument and be compelling with it, and you can say the ways in which the affirmative would be reported upon to audiences of Americans as a good idea that's going to solve some of their problems, it's going to make their lives better, it's going to create new jobs, it's going to smooth over differences in politics, it's going to lower the budget deficit, any other good thing it's going to do. All of those are sources of stress relief. Every single one of those is going to result in people having a higher immune response when swine flu comes to town. So, two more premises that you need to nail down, and this argument should be ready to go. One of them is you need to be able to win that if individuals have this sort of hyped up response and they are killed, that somehow this will translate into large-scale deaths, that this will actually snowball and it won't just be individual people dying off, because that might not outweigh the case. One of the things that is reported a lot, it was an effect, it was something that happened during the Spanish flu epidemic back in 1918, and some people worry that it could happen right now, is key people, key public health people, key people in positions of leadership, that while the flu is raging out of control in certain towns, maybe the most experienced doctor in town is struck down with the flu. And whereas a lot of people could have been saved if someone was just there to take care of them, when the doctor dies, a lot of people die, because who's there to take care of them? Or when the mayor dies, or the chief of police dies, or whoever's in charge of the local disaster relief response agency, a lot of people wind up flat on their backs in their own homes and wind up starving to death just because no one can deliver food to them, because the people who coordinate social services, they were struck down by the flu. So what you can do is you can win a cascade effect, that if particular people are struck down by the flu, if people's immune system is raised to where more people are likely to be struck, that raises the risk that key people will be taken out, and then the deaths from the flu reach truly monumental stages. Now, two things you can say that I think will help you characterize this as outweighing the case. I think you could take the argument I've just made about key people in particular towns, particularly isolated towns, and you can say, you know, even if we don't win very much of our argument, even if they can minimize our internal links or our impacts, we only have to be right about this happening in one town, and it could completely decimate it. Now, even a medium-sized town is equivalent to 4 or 5 September 11ths put side by side. And think about how strenuous the United States response was just to September 11th. If we're winning, that we can account for several times that many deaths, then that's something that clearly warrants you thinking about voting negative. And the other kind of number that I think you'll stumble across in doing research about the Spanish flu, the pandemic from before, ran from 1918 until 1920. It was March of 1918 until June of 1920. And in that time, there are varying estimates, but the most typical range of estimates is that the Spanish flu killed between 50 and 100 million people. That's more than died in World War II. That's more than died in World War I. And it's very difficult to find a single source, an event involving mass death that had pretty much one identifiable source in all human history on that scale. So if you can win that we are at risk of a rerun of the Spanish flu pandemic, then you've got something that I think can outweigh the case. So that initial link, I concede, from coverage of environmental problems and pollution to stress, that's pretty tenuous. But if you can go into the 2NR and you have links from a dozen different directions, the plan cleans up a dozen different sources of stress, and stress is the depressor of the immune system, then this is an argument that I think has some promise. Keep in mind, you got to hold it in reserve. If you run this for the mom and dad judges, the chances that they're going to get confused are fairly high, and the chances that they're just going to find it far-fetched are even higher. But save it for your debate connoisseurs. The good thing about it is, it's a good broad-spectrum generic. Further on into the year, you might even be able to find on-point evidence that whatever environmental problem the people in your area are writing their affirmatives about, you can find on-point evidence that those are a source of stress. And, then you can win 100 million deaths, one of the biggest medical holocausts in human history, and that would not be a bad thing to weigh against the case.